Thank you very much, Sean, and indeed it's a privilege for me to be asked to launch this book, and I would like to thank Liberties Press for asking me to do it, and to thank Caroline in particular for asking me to do it, and for also sending me on some information on the book itself. Just to say, for Liberties Press, they have published books on Michael D. Higgins, President, and also on Gaeltacht, and as you said, in Conhulan and many more major names. But I doubt if they've published a book in the past that will match this particular book. I've read it for the last 2 evenings, and it's really spectacular. And I must say it's very well written, but more especially it's really a history of the Irish theatre over the past, I suppose, 70 years, and that's why it's a very, very important book. It starts, I suppose, with Barry's own life, and it's a very personal book as well. It starts with he being born in 1924 in Cloughjordan. His father was a postmaster, so he moved around the country a little bit. So he was only 7 when they moved to Monaghan, and he gives really very revealing description of the stark conditions that his family lived in Kappa House, just outside Monaghan. It was one of those old great houses, but it wasn't certainly easy living there at that particular time. And it gives us a feeling of what it was like to live it in those times. And also, he gives us very good insight into his parents as well. His father was the fact, I suppose, that he fought in the First World War and survived, which is very, very fortunate, obviously. And his mother was very influential too in Barry's life. At times, and it's described in the books, they had their tensions, but certainly I think that both of them, in different ways, influenced Barry's life in the future. There's a beautiful story in the book that reminds me of a similar story by Billy Keane about his father, John B. Billy wrote a very nice poem one time called Starman, and actually it's nearly the same story in the book, where Barry's father took him for a walk in a frosty night, and he described the stars to him and the constellations, and certainly that really influenced, I'm sure, Barry's life, because he repeats it in the book. But Billy had a similar experience with his father, and the first line in this book, first person mentioned actually, is John B. Keane. And John B. is dealt with by Barry extensively later on in the book. Just his earlier life, I think it's worth noting that Barry, he was a good student at actually secondary school. He studied very hard for his Leaving Cert, but it was at secondary school really that he developed his love and his ambition to be an actor. And he performed in the school opera in Robbo the Forest as a Greenwood bandit in that particular opera. And the first year he was the bandit, second year he was the king, and he did very well. He did so well that he was admired and he was a hero all over Monaghan for a few weeks. But then a lady came along called Siobhan McKenna and took all that fame away from him, and that's all described in the book. And it was a coincidence that two of our greatest actors, they were born so close to each other. Then he went to UCC in Cork, and I suppose it's a coincidence in one way, because he had a very good time in UCC. He went around to cinemas and theatres, and certainly didn't do a whole pile of study there. But the great Dennis Brosnan was here at a lecture last Monday, and he told us he did the same thing actually for the first year he was in college down there. So all those people that went to UCC obviously enjoyed the city as much as they enjoyed the college. But then Barry, he moved on as he said himself, he was going to be a dentist. That's what he was studying. His parents were anxious that he might be a doctor, but he said he would prefer to look into someone's mouth rather than their tummies. But then he went to UCC, and that didn't work out either, because all of this time he wanted to be an actor. And then he got his break when he was accepted into the Gaeltacht School of Acting, and he was very fortunate there to come across a very good actress and teacher called Ria Mooney. And certainly she had a major influence in his profession as an actor and his future. And I think it's interesting as well, his mother's reaction. His father was very supportive and guaranteed him that he would support him for the same length of time as he would be in college. But his mother, I think, was a little bit more critical when Barry mentioned that she was going to the Gaeltacht School of Acting. She said, after all we did for him going around the country like a thinker at that time. But obviously his mother was concerned, because his mother had a major influence in Barry. And if you read the book, it was when you were on holidays in Bettystown, she took you to theatre, and in Mana, and she took him to theatre, and he was there when he was performing on stage. On one occasion, the young girl was playing opposite him, I think overindulged, and Barry had to withdraw. He didn't accept her affections as he would have liked, because his mother was watching him from the floor. But when they went away, a few miles away, he certainly indulged. On a different stage. But certainly both his parents, as I said, were very influential in his life, and Barry, I think, really regretted the fact that he wasn't there when his father died, so he obviously had great respect for his father as well. And after the Gaeltacht School of Acting, he was very fortunate. Again, I think Barry was very fortunate with the women he met in his life. I think all men are fortunate, sometimes unfortunate, with the women they meet. But in Barry's case, certainly he was very fortunate. And he met Nora Lever in 1946, and they set up the 37 Theatre Club. And that was really very, very successful, led to the first Irish production of The Crucible. And also he went to England then, but he came back, and again he renewed acquaintances with Nora, and that was certainly very, very successful at that particular time. I would just, looking at Barry performed all over the country. He was very much involved in these pop-up theatres around the place, and he certainly worked very hard. He was like, I suppose, an itinerant in ways, as his mother did suggest at that particular time, but he went through a whole process. But looking at the story here, I think really when he got involved with Jiminy, I think that was a major departure in his career as well. And certainly there was the individual involved there was Phyllis Ryan, another great influence in his life. And she set up the Jiminy Company, and they performed in the Albana in Bus Áras, under Bus Áras. And that's where really a major amount of work was done, and that's where an awful lot of John B. Keane's work was done as well. And I was just looking at Ray McNally. He was doing Kennedy's Children, and they were about the children after Kennedy. When I heard of that, it reminded me of the Pope's Children. So obviously that title was influenced by Kennedy's Children, but it certainly didn't work out. And it's where John B. Keane there again came to the rescue. And the Letters of a Matchmaker, it was after the second week, they fell back on the Letters of a Matchmaker, and it saved the day. And as Barry said, for Ray McNally and his wife at that time, Ronnie Masterson, that it saved their house and their property and so on, because it was very successful. And in that particular chapter, it just shows the amount of contact he had with John B, the amount of plays, all the major plays he directed the major plays by John B. Keane, and both himself and Phyllis Ryan, I would say, were possibly the most influential people in John B.'s career at national level, and it comes across very strongly in the book as well. There's one particular story in the book that again demonstrates the generosity of John B. Keane. And one time, and I just picked this up, one time Barry came to Killarney with his wife and some friends, and he discovered he never brought a checkbook. So he contacted John B. Keane, John B. anyway, and John B. arrived in Killarney, and without saying anything, John B. invited him into the toilet, and he passed him on some money, and Barry said, "Remember, this is a loan," and John B. said, "Call it a wedding present." And as he says here, a decent man, John B. But I think that we all benefited from that type of generosity by John B. Keane. I have loads of marks here, but I won't go through them because I want you to get on to Barry. But I think his relationship with his wife is very, very important. They met and they got married again in the space of 5 months. As I said, he seemed to have made the right decision with all the important women in his life. But his relationship with his wife obviously was a very strong one, and as he said in the book, it developed over time. She was a farmer, and obviously a great support to Barry, and his description of how he heard that she was taken to hospital when he had left the house that morning. Only the previous week she was working with the local community, setting up a local festival, climbing a ladder, and she was very fit. She was playing golf, she was working the farm, and then she got a stroke, and she was taken to the hospital, and she seemed to be recovering, but Barry describes that so well. And then he describes a great memory he had of when they were on their honeymoon, or coming back from their honeymoon, how he was driving down to Kildare, and this big black car swept by them, splashing them all over with water. But it brought back that memory to him. But he just mentioned the fact that here he was coming back with a young wife who steered him through life afterwards, or something to that effect. So that's a very poignant story, and there are several more stories like that in it. And also, he's very much appreciative of his family as well. I suppose he mentions Anne a lot in the book, obviously, and the rest of the family, 5 in all. But I would say Anne could be maybe his favourite, I don't know. And that's understandable. But certainly, when you look at the story, right from the very beginning to the end, and he speaks about retirement in the end, and I think we should all, us people now who are pushing in that direction, whenever that is, with the passing years, my retiring age extended. In my youth, I considered 60 a proper age at which to go. As 60 approached, I pushed it up to 70. Then 75, then 80. Now I might as well shop till I drop. And I was out recently to see a new film by Neil Jordan, Byzantium. I was out on the set one day, and I saw Saoirse Ronan, and I discovered that who was playing a major role in that film as well, but the great man himself, Barry Cassin. So there's a lot left in this man yet, but I would suggest certainly, Barry, that this is not only your own family history, but it's the history really of Irish theatre as well. If you want to get a feel for Irish theatre, it's all in this book. So in conclusion, I'm just honoured to be asked to launch it here in Listowel. I know that people might be able to give it a better treatment than I would, but I've known Barry for a long time coming here to Listowel. He was at the first Writers' Week. If you go up to John B. Keane's bar and look at that photograph on the wall, Barry is in it. Also, he has directed Nora Rillan here in the Midnight Court, which was very successful. He directed so many John Bees plays, all very successfully. Also, he was the Grey Man in 2004 in The Dandy Dolls by North Kerry playwright George Fitzmaurice, and he gave an excellent performance in that. So he's one of ours, and it's great to be here this evening to support him this afternoon, and delighted to be sitting next to Joanna Keane because of the Keane's connection with the Cassins. And so it's a very, very important day in a way for the Cassin family, but also for the Keane family because of this really strong connection between both. So thank you very much.